In the case of the Oath Keepers, they really kind of stood out because even in the footage, you could see that unlike so much of this rabble, these guys really had a plan and they were moving like a military force, which is really what they aspire to be.
Oaths like that were the inspiration for the far-right militia group in America, the Oath Keepers. That's why they're called that. But now three of them and another man have been convicted of doing the very opposite, trying to prevent the democratically elected Joe Biden from becoming president. Will Sommer is the politics reporter for the Daily Beast and author of the Trust the Plan book on QAnon. We asked him earlier to tell us about the Oath Keepers.
The Oath Keepers are a militia group in the United States, very large one. They get their name from the idea that they are all former police officers, soldiers, and so they claim that they're upholding their oaths to the Constitution by, operating in this far right militia.
And what did they do on the day of January the 6th?
Right. So on January 6th, a group of Oath Keepers broke into the Capitol alongside the mob. And I think what got a lot of people's attention was that they moved in a very organized way. It seemed like they, unlike all these rabble who were kind of like brawling with cops and stuff like that, it seemed that these folks really knew what they were doing and had a plan. As it turned out, they did. They were very focused on this idea, breaking into the Capitol and somehow disrupting the vote count, to make Joe Biden president. We later find out that they had a ton of guns stocked across the river from Washington, D.C. and Virginia, where those guns are allowed, and that they were communicating with each other in Virginia and D.C., and that there were a lot of discussions about bringing guns into the city and potentially fighting police officers with them or somehow using those guns to overthrow the government.
But they didn't actually do that, did they? What have they been convicted for?
This week, we have 4 Oath Keepers convicted of sedition against the government. This is the second Oath Keepers trial. The leader of the Oath Keepers was convicted last year, Stuart Rhodes, and this is sort of a continuation of a new trial, but people facing similar charges.
And what was the verdict?
All 4 of the Oath Keepers in this second trial were found guilty. In the first trial, Stuart Rhodes was found guilty of sedition, and then some of his associates were found guilty on lesser charges. But this time, the government was able to really make the charges stick.
And what do we think about this then? What is it because they're former police officers that it's a problem, or is there a genuine view that these were people who weren't just trying to cause chaos? Because my recollections of a lot of the footage was it was people milling about. It was people who didn't really know what to do once they'd made the breach. There's this established that they were actually out to do something far more serious and long lasting.
Yeah, so these charges establish exactly that. So, we can look at there were different groups at play in the riot. There were the Proud Boys, who are actually currently on trial in the same courthouse as these charges against the Oath Keepers are coming down. In the case of the Oath Keepers, as I said, they really kind of stood out because even in the footage, you could see that unlike so much of this rabble, these guys really had a plan and they were moving like a military force, which is really what they aspire to be. And so it was clear from that they had a plan. Then the government releases all these text messages that the Oath Keepers shared with one another, all of their financial planning. And so it is clear that they organized a group and said, we are going to the Capitol to prevent Joe Biden from being sworn in as president, and that they attempted to do exactly that.
And how much does this go back to Donald Trump then? Is there a line we can draw between him and these people?
There's not a direct connection to the White House, but the Oath Keepers have a lot of ties to Trump associates. One of the guys found guilty this week, the night beforehand, him and his friends had worked as security for Roger Stone, who's, of course, a very close Trump associate. So these are not just guys who are kind of crazy guys walking in off the street. These are guys who have ties to the larger Trump movement.
We're in the long run up to the next election. How significant is January the 6th still as an election issue? How significant are these convictions? You say the Proud Boys are on trial as well. Will this still have resonance in 18 months' time?
I think it's a great question. Certainly in the midterms, I think a lot of political observers expected January 6th not to really have much of an impact. But then we saw Republicans, do much worse than they were expected to. So perhaps these issues are having an impact with voters, just this sense that Republicans are sort of out of control. So, we'll have to see in 2024. Certainly Democrats were really hoping that it would affect voters. They had this whole January 6th committee and all this. And I think from a practical aspect, these prosecutions have really disrupted these groups. We're talking about the head of the Oath Keepers is going to be going to prison for a decade at least. The Proud Boys, if they're found guilty, their leaders will be going to prison for a long time. So it's really scrambled the operations of a lot of these far right groups in the U.S.
And it depends, I suppose, whether who is leading the Republican ticket in 18 months' time as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and if it's Donald Trump, I think they'll be much more energized than if it's someone like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
That was Will Sommer there, the politics reporter for the Daily Beast in Washington, D.C.